Hey, Phil, welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
So, Phil, I follow you on Twitter and I've seen you post from all around Europe in the last few weeks. Where are you now?
I'm currently back in Amsterdam. It's become a little bit of a home base in between my little mini adventures on the bike to random parts of Europe.
So, if you're somewhere around Europe on your bike and you introduce yourself to people, how do you introduce yourself? What do you do in a sentence or two?
Um, by my day job, I'm a software engineer. I work for a company called Stoplight as a kind of a product designer and manager, and doing DevRel. And by night, in my spare time, I am working on a reforestation charity called Protect Earth.
Oh, so this is like your second job almost.
Absolutely, yeah. It's
So
kind of a hobby mixed in with important stuff.
it's slowly becoming more and more of your time.
Yes.
So if people are watching this and they only have a few minutes maybe to skim the first part of this video, what is one thing they can take away? What is one thing they can do to keep in touch with you and what you're up to?
Head over to Protect.earth to find out a whole bunch of information about our plans to reforest as much of the UK as we can get away with.
Oh, so you have one of those fancy new domain names? So protect.earth.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And you've got a newsletter there where people can get your updates.
Yeah, so as we go into planting season, which is kind of winter, sounds a little funny. I didn't realize it at first, but trees are generally planted between kind of December and March in the UK. And so as we go into planting season, there's going to be a lot of events coming up with our various landowners, and you can come along and we'll have COVID spaced, safe reforestation efforts, so you can actually get involved planting the trees.
Oh, okay. So most people in the tech space will say, "Hey, watch my presentation, sign up for a free trial of my
hmm
SaaS service." You're saying, "Come along and bring a spade and come and help me plant some trees."
Yeah, you can support with money, you can support with your time. Should be fun. Um, so yeah, come along.
So, Phil, I've followed your work for a good number of years now. I think I remember you published a book on APIs a few years ago.
hmm
How did you start as a developer working on APIs and working on heavily on PHP as well, and start to develop an interest in environmental issues?
It was an interesting transition. I think kind of got a little bit internet famous like years ago, doing a lot, PHP stuff and a lot of open source work and things like that, and then
Twitter
kind of started
famous.
Twitter famous. Exactly, yeah, like nothing particularly important, but like a few followers that mean I can quite often raise money relatively well just by kind of working by tweeting about things and by working with other kind of authors and people who sell SaaS products. I've done quite a few charity bike rides in the past. Just the sort of like do 100 miles for whatever benefit for the AIDS and cancer and a few other things.
Even
Um,
now, maybe a couple of days ago, I saw someone who was selling off their PHP elephants to try and raise money for your project.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you have a couple of Twitter followers, you can kind of do things like that, where they reach a larger audience. And so I used to just kind of talk about APIs and things like that. And now I've been trying to kind of leverage that for the last year or two. I've been raising awareness of the climate crisis and of solutions that people can get involved with. And um, so over the last since I've been bike nomad since the end of 2018, I've been cycling around, and it just started off as just a bike ride. I was just touring around and figuring out where to go next and having fun. But the more I traveled around Europe, the more I realized how deforested everywhere is. You cycle through these beautiful areas. You look on the map to try and go to the greenest areas. You go to the Black Forest, and it's all farms. And you go through the Alps, and it's all casinos and hotels. And like everywhere you go, you think of these places as being wild and remote, and it's just like highways and supermarkets, and it gets quite depressing. And even going down some of the back roads, the middle of nowhere, little windy kind of gravel tracks, I just see clear cut woods everywhere. So I started raising awareness for a company called Ecology, previously Offset Earth, and just getting people to buy trees. And the more I got into danger cycling through kind of nice areas, but at the wrong time of year, cycling through like the Balkans in the middle of summer, And while the UK was getting 31-degree heat waves, I was in like 43 degrees, getting heat stroke, hyponatremia, all these different problems. And whenever I post videos about that, people be like, oh crap, and they donate a bunch of trees. And so eventually I decided to have a more hands-on approach of trying to get trees planted myself instead of just kind of getting money sent to some project and having them planted.
So Ecology with an I think.
Yes, Ecology with an I.com.
They were kind of the almost one of the original platforms in the tech/environmental space. What do? They basically allow you to donate money, and they pick worthy projects to send your money to.
That's exactly right. There's a bunch of charities out there that have been doing all sorts of reforestation and conservation work for donkey's years, you know. But a lot of the time they have a really bad website, and it's really quite hard to donate. And I started off using Eden Reforestation Projects, which is one of the charities that Ecology supports. But I was trying to get people to donate directly to them. And half the time the payments were being rejected and it wasn't quite working, and people couldn't work out what they did, and there was no fundraising page. And so Ecology basically have come along to kind of make that a lot easier, using the power of technology and like Stripe payments and easy tech like that, to just make the process really smooth. And so not only do they have when you sign up with Ecology, you have like a monthly membership fee. It's kind of like the same as Netflix. It's like a fancy coffee a month. And they kind of take all that money and distribute it to different projects. So some of it will go to tree reforestation projects. Other ones will go to carbon avoidance, because there's so much more to fixing the climate than just planting trees. It's a very important part, but it's one of 1,000 things we have to do. And so they'll send money off to other gold standard backed projects. Gold standard is a kind of a accreditation.
So the tree planting is almost like an easy to remember hook that, okay, how many trees do you have? How many trees have you planted? That's a way that people can understand it and get involved.
Yeah.
But what Ecology does is a little more complex, and they may take your money and say you've planted X number of trees. But in fact, in addition to planting trees, they've also picked out a wider range of projects too.
Yeah, so a lot of projects will kind of take money and say, like, we have offset this much carbon, which is the equivalent to this number of trees. And it all starts to get a bit shady and murky. And I don't really like that approach. Ecology never confuse trees and tons of CO2. They're two separate metrics. So when you pay money, like, you'll literally, it will tell you how many trees you have funded, and it will tell you how many tons of CO2 you've avoided. And they don't confuse those. So planting a tree obviously will remove CO2, but they don't fudge those numbers in together, because it can be really hard to estimate how much it is, how much like actual CO2 is removed by a tree, and there's survival rates you have to take into consideration and different things like that.
So Ecology have basically done a really good job of almost adding maybe a gamification layer to make it easier to contribute, to make it easier to get involved. I've certainly seen people in some of the Slack channels I'm in where environmental issues are not normally discussed at all. I've seen people posting their Ecology links and saying, hey, I'm up to 500 trees or 600 trees now.
Exactly. And there's a leaderboard as well. So they start to compete with each other to try and get higher up the leaderboard.
Oh, I didn't realize that, but that's pure gamification right there.
Absolutely. Badges too.
So, Phil, you were initially helping Ecology, who I guess are a UK-based company?
Yeah, they're based in Bristol. And
so how did that interest snowball into cycling around Europe for a couple of years, fundraising, and the new Protect Earth project that you're involved in now?
Yeah, so my involvement with Ecology was kind of, I needed somewhere to do a fundraiser. I started cycling around Europe and kind of doing a lap, trying to go to every country. And I wanted like a profile where I could raise money, where I could send people and you could see the number go up, right?
Did you manage it? Did you make it to every European country?
I got to 32 in 2019, but I injured my Achilles, and there's quite a lot of countries in Europe. I also forgot about like Iceland and Malta, and so there's a lot of little bits that are quite hard to get.
The Faroe Islands and
yeah. But I got the majority of mainland. I still need to go and do the kind of the northeast stuff, the Baltic countries, but I'll get there after lockdown. But yeah, so I started off just kind of fundraising for Ecology while I was doing that, and then interestingly, during lockdown, so I was cycling back from Morocco. I'd been riding around there a bit, and as I got off the ferry from Africa, it's kind of the news of the lockdown started to really hit. So I had to just mush it, getting as quick as I could home to the UK before like the borders closed and things like that. We didn't really know what was going to happen, so I had to like ride really hard through like days and days of floods and storms in France, more extreme weather. And I finally got back to the UK kind of the day before the lockdown was announced. And I was slightly concerned that I'd got COVID. I had a few kind of symptoms. I was like worried that I'd picked it up on coming through France, which was kind of a bit of a hotspot. So I ended up finding somewhere near my family house, but not too close to be a problem. And I ended up in lockdown on a farm, which was 450 acres and like 60 acres worth of woods, and just loads and loads of fields and loads of open space. And it was honestly quite a nice place to be stuck. We thought I was going to be there for a week, and I ended up there for 3 months. And I ended up making friends with the owners of the land, and they got really interested in my whole thing with ecology and trying to get trees planted. And they wanted to know if they could plant trees on their land to help out. And so Ecology had been working on kind of planting things more locally. There was a lot of, initially they were just using Eden reforestation projects, who have a few different sites around kind of lesser developed countries. And all of the trees going through Ecology were going to Madagascar. And it's awesome to plant in those places. The closer to the equator, the more effect it has. And those are kind of really desertified areas where the ecosystem is struggling. And so planting trees there can restore wildlife and just solve a lot of problems and give those people a job as well, which is important. So it can do all this good for like 15p a tree, which is so cheap. But there's a few issues that meant that they wanted to start kind of planting trees more locally as well. So they have partners in the UK and partners in America and Australia, various different charities that do the planting. But they wanted to try and plant more trees in the UK. And so now I have a charity that's doing that. We're starting off with this farm that I was on lockdown in, putting 3,100 trees in there. And I've managed to find a few other local landowners who are interested in planting trees as well. So it's kind of growing up from there.
So you have a registered charity now?
We submitted to the Charity Commission, and they said it would take 40 days. It's been about 60, and we're still waiting for them to like finally approve us. But yeah, it will be a CIO, which is a company handled by the Charity Commission.
So your goal is to try and find some plots of land in the UK to start planting trees?
Yeah, we will work with local landowners to plant their land. We give them a little cut of the proceeds every year. So we go back and check to make sure the trees are okay and see how the survival rate's doing and replant any that didn't make it. So we work with people who already own land, because that is obviously the cheapest way to get things done. And we also look to buy our own land. So right now we're raising money for our first plot. We've got a couple of thousand raised by various different kind of fundraising. Like I cycled down to Croatia, raising money, and ran a half Ironman and a few other silly things. Right now I'm having a virtual yard sale. Gary Hockin was sold all of his PHP elephants to raise money. So we've got a few things like that going. And mostly I'm just going to like loan my life savings to the charity so that we can buy our first plot and then, pay it off as the trees come in. And then hopefully I'll get my pension back. Just anything I can do, really.
So you're kickstarting the charity with your own money?
Absolutely. So I'll just be an investor. Yeah.
So the goal is to find multiple plots of land and grow trees, plus also try and encourage some landowners as well to turn over some of their existing land to trees to try and do your little bit, to try and prompt other people, to maybe try and prompt people who are watching an interview like this, who see what you're doing, to donate to Ecology. It's a task which needs to be approached sort of piece by piece, multiple different angles. It's an enormously complex task to try and tackle a problem like this.
Yeah, well, I've been researching since kind of March, and I know a whole bunch of information about like hedgerow subsidies and all this other just nonsense. It's really a complicated field, and
good pun.
Luckily, Yeah, thanks. Actually, not intentional. There's a whole bunch of really good advisors that are helping us out, and basically, yeah, there's a lot of different people have a lot of different motivations. Right now, everyone's scared about the environment, and those who aren't should be. It is a big, scary situation, and we can fix it. And we know how to solve it. We just need to get on with it. And a lot of people have different motivations for, like, a lot of different landowners have different motivations. Some people, a lot of, when you go past a farm, the person that lives in the farmhouse might not actually be the farmer. You know what I mean? Like, they often kind of lease their land out to various people for different purposes. So one of the farms we're working with, they lease out land to some farmers who run dairy cows there, and grow various crops to sustain those dairy cows. You know, they only use like 90% of the land. You could plant 10% of that with trees around the perimeters, and it wouldn't affect the cows at all. So other people might want to kick off their tenants because they're fed up of having cows on the property. You actually don't make that much money from having cows on your land. It's like £400 per hectare per year. And some landowners are interested in the idea of making money from forestry instead. So, you know, taking down a small number of the trees every couple of years, or leaving them all there and taking advantage of things like the woodland carbon credit scheme, where the government will just kind of give you money for leaving trees alone for a long time. And so there's various grants and subsidies and private money like Ecology and all these different things. And you can kind of glue them together in various ways to make it appealing for landowners to do. And some landowners don't want any money. They just want to plant trees and not be massively out of pocket for it. So they just want free trees. So with them, we can kind of, you know, take the money and look after it, and then hire accredited people to come around and do verifications. So the management fee that we take can make sure that the trees are doing nicely and things like that.
So the long-term goal is to try and reduce the carbon output of the UK, and to produce a healthier country, a healthier habitat. And this needs to be done through a little bit of a government initiative, a little bit of a private initiative, or a charity initiative like yours,
Mm-hmm.
to do it with some financial incentives, to do it with some charitable incentives. That it's like how do you eat an elephant? Piece by piece. You have
Right.
to nibble at it in all sorts of different ways. So you are getting a charity to try and raise some money through Patreon and try and get some plots of land around the country. Do you have any picked out? Have you managed to buy a plot of land yet?
We've been looking at a few plots. Initially, we were trying to kind of get a large loan from the banks, and the banks have been incredibly unhelpful. I know a few of them are kind of struggling with COVID and things, but it's been much harder to get a loan than I expected, because a lot of banks will only loan to you if you plan to build a house on that land. Like, if you want to be a housing developer, it's super easy, but if you want to buy land to plant trees, they just don't care. So we're kind of taking an approach where we focus a little more on the landowner projects for this year, and then try and find some land and prepare it for planting next winter. So we were looking at a few plots that were, it's amazing how much the price of land varies around the country. I mean, that seems kind of obvious, like houses cost different amounts of money, but it's staggering, the per acre cost of land. If you are looking in kind of the southeast or the southwest, close to Bristol or Bath, where I'm usually based, it can be like £10,000 an acre, and you can only get like 500 trees on that. But if you go to kind of the middle of Wales or less populated parts of Scotland, you can get stuff for like £1,000 to £2,000 an acre. So we've got a few picked out that we're kind of using as a case study to think about the money. And for, you know, £70,000, we could get 52 acres up near Dumfries in Scotland, and it's an area that floods all the time, and it's this wide open hill that should be covered in trees that would actually help stop the flooding. So we're kind of looking into things like that. We now have to understand all the rules about flood management areas and everything else. So it can get quite complicated to figure out, why is this land so cheap? Is there a problem we haven't thought of? Are we going to get stuck with a lemon that we can't plant on? But yeah, we're taking our time to make sure we get the right bit of land first. And we're trying to do it without the support of the banks, which makes it difficult. And like, I am one investor, but we could really do with just more money before we kind of make that big purchase. So Luckily, we are planting, so far we're up to 8,000 trees planned for this winter, and we're going to try and get to 10,000. But we actually have funding for 30,000. So like our goal was to get to 10,000, but like if we suddenly find someone who wants a whole lot more trees, we can do that too.
So how would that work if you pick out a plot in Scotland? Would that involve you putting a spade on the back of your bike, cycling up and living up there for a few months?
Yes.
Okay.
Basically, I would be. I plan on getting some sort of caravan or RV or something, some sort of site office, maybe just an old shipping container, and a good mobile internet connection, working remotely from my site office on my day job, and then every day trying to plant as many trees as possible. Yeah, that's pretty much the plan.
So how's it going trying to balance a full-time job, a full-time developer job, and such an involved hobby?
Well, luckily I'm working with really smart, interesting people. So there's two other founders of the charity. One is the secretary, another is the treasurer, and I am the chairperson, and we all fit those roles quite well. Like the treasurer is Ed Stone, an accountant who's handling all the kind of financial stuff, and Andy Hurd is the secretary, who's really good at research and paperwork and figuring out grants and subsidies. And we have other advisors who will like bring something really valuable to the table. So it's pretty much just like a little signal conversation where we'll just kind of chip in ideas and bounce things around. And so it's quite easy to balance the two things. And it's, like I said, the reason I described it as a hobby is not because it's just like a little bit of fun on the side. And it's more that it's something I'm so passionate about and care about so much that it doesn't feel like work. You know, like I can do my day job and then kind of go to the pub with a laptop and do a bunch of research for 2-3 hours and not really feel like that's, you know, extra work because it's something I really care about.
So a lot of people, I guess myself included, we've got kids and responsibilities and time is short. What are ways in which someone like myself that might run a company can help or contribute to this without necessarily going to set up our own charity and try to buy our own plot of land?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different ways people can help. I mean, just kind of tweeting about it is massively helpful because you know, people get the word out that way. Any financial support you could possibly spare, like £10 a month, just kind of shows potential lenders that this is a serious project, because the more people that are willing to contribute to it, the more serious it looks. So if we do manage to get talking to a bank, we might be able to get that bigger loan of like £300,000.
So this £10 a month should go to the Patreon site?
Yes. So if you join our Patreon, one of the things I'm really excited about doing actually to help increase like trust and visibility into the project is I've got a drone that I'm going to start flying around at all the planting projects, and over time you can see how the trees grow. And so all of those things will be on the mailing list and the Patreon. The two are kind of, you know, whichever, you'll get updates. And so, yeah, if you join the Patreon and support us with a little bit of money, then you'll get all these nice updates of like, here's a whole bunch of little saplings that have just been planted and things like that.
It seems like very early in this process. Still, we had one of the lead data scientists from Automatic on the interview recently, and he was talking through the process of slowly trying to move a large company like Automatic towards zero carbon emissions, or at least net zero. And there's a lot of education to do. There's a lot of sort of profile raising, trying to just patiently explain to people why this is a useful thing to be involved with, a useful thing to care about. Even, well, you've been involved in this 2-3 years now?
Yeah, probably, 2 or 3.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that is still difficult, still emerging, right? I'm sure you have a lot of difficult conversations with the banks, with maybe even with the people who are selling the land as well, to try and explain what you're doing and raise some awareness of why it's important.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like over time, the why it's important is becoming less of a difficult argument, you know? We're all starting to realize how serious the climate crisis is. Over 2019 and 2020, like there's not that many people left that just don't get it. I mean, there are some people that have been lied to so heavily by various politicians, they are a bit confused, but it's only going to be a matter of time until the rest of them kind of catch up. And so, like when I was cycling around and kind of raising awareness, I was talking to people in person as well, and just kind of when they'd ask why I was writing, I'm like, oh, I'm just raising awareness for, reforestation and carbon offsetting because, climate crisis is mad. And they were like, yeah, I know, it's never normally like this. You're in an area that's just had a wildfire rip through it, or just been flooded out, or just had it's been 43 degrees every single day and it's not usually that hot. Everyone that I speak to in person and online is like, yeah, this is mad. What can I do? And so there's different ways that you can talk to different types of people about what they can do. I heard a statistic the other day, like 60% of CO2 comes from like small to medium enterprises. So you hear about something like, Microsoft or Google or Apple, and they're deciding to offset their carbon emissions. That is great. But that's only a couple of companies that are responsible for a small amount of the bigger picture. So if you work at a company of any size, looking for a kind of carbon footprint calculator for your company is important. There's one called Bloom by Tomorrow, and I can give you links for all this if you want to put them in show notes. One called Bloom. There's one called like Planetly, and there's a few others that are very low effort. Like a company can sign up and just find out what their carbon footprint is, and then they can kind of go about offsetting that in various ways. And one good way is Ecology. It's not just for a single person. You can put your business and you can put your family on there. And so when you sign up as a business, you can choose to pay a little bit extra to support reforestation in your country. And so if you're a British business and you do that, then that money goes to various different planting charities like myself. So if you're a business, one of the best things you can do is, you can add like Shopify extensions that will support Ecology, and be like, every purchase, adds 10 trees, which is like £1.50 or whatever it is. And things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of things that can do. And I wrote a article the other day actually for like, I work in tech. What can I do to save the planet? Here's 100 things. So I can give you that link as well if you think
awesome.
Listeners would be interested.
All these links, we'll make sure they pop up on the screen so people can see them easily.
Great.
Cool. Okay, so my final question is, with Ecology, they often will show you the size of your forest, how many trees you've planted through your donations. How many trees have you planted so far, Phil, with your charity work? Are you still at zero when it comes to actually buying land and putting seeds in the ground?
Still at zero, unfortunately. So as we're recording, it's October 29th. Our first planting will begin the first half of December. We haven't got an exact date for the delivery yet, but they are kind of, it depends on like how what the temperature is when the trees go dormant. So it's still a bit of a vague window, but the first 3,000 trees will be going in the ground kind of the first week or two of December. The next 1,000 are going in just after Christmas. And then we've got kind of a bunch more coming next year. So still zero right now. But with Ecology, I think I'm up to 105,000 trees. So I look forward to trying to beat that number physically.
So if we check in with you in 6 months, the number could be in the thousands.
In 6 months, it should be at least 10,000. Yeah.
Awesome. Wish you all the best with it, Phil. People can follow you on Twitter as well to get photos. I think you have. I've seen a few photos fly by on Twitter of you with the. I'm not sure the name of the dog. I just call
Finn.
it
the Everything is Fine dog.
Yeah. So if people follow you on Twitter.
Yeah. So they'll see photographs of me and Finn traveling the world and looking at kind of. I've been trying to show him the various different problems out there. So Finn has seen miles of plastic waste strewn about Morocco and huge fires and floods and clear cutting and just every terrible thing you can imagine, which isn't meant to depress anyone. It's meant to kind of stoke people's interest in action, because there is a lot of bad going on and we need to make sure there's more good than bad. Otherwise, it's just going to get worse,
Awesome. Well, we support you with Publish Press, and we'll follow you on Twitter. Make sure that we get a good view when your first trees go in the ground later this year.
Excellent. Thank you very much.